Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley, and I'm here for Mentor Mondays. And I'm really excited because, it's today we're really going to start getting into what it looks like to use science to your advantage. Now, I'm going to be pulling up. A presentation. This way, it's really easy to see. Anything that you do with me, you actually don't have to try at all. You can try. A lot of things are very simple, but this isn't one of them. So let me pull up my presentation and then share that screen with you and present. Let's see here. Full screen. All right. Let's go back. All right, cool. Let me just wait. Can't do full screen because let's be real. Okay. I will add you now. Picture in picture share. Okay, let's share a window. Nope. Chrome tab. Oh, here we go. Presentation. I hope this is the one. Nope. I love working this out. So this is a new platform. I've only done a few of these. Oh, here we go. So, here we go. All right, perfect. So let's go back. We don't need that. Creating you a little presentation in the morning. Okay, so I'm just giving everybody a minute. Monday. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. So we've got, let me see if I can go back to my thing now. I love how it's, yeah, there we go. Sweet. We can see it all. I'm going to, it really shouldn't be. Let's see if we can present that full screen and then see if it's a thing. Okay. Oh, right. That was tedious, but we got there. All right. So a little bit about what I'm doing, why I do it, and then we can get into the good stuff. So the foundations method is something that I've been teaching for a very long time. And it's essentially habitual technique. And it's the secret behind all great dancers. And what that means is that you literally don't have to think about your technique. There's no, oh yeah, I need to point my toe. I always use the point your toe, but there's obviously corrections and habitual technique go way beyond pointing your toe, but I think it's relatable. And then how many times you scream at somebody to point their toe. If they have it in their body, no matter what they're doing, whether they're learning or they're not, or they're doing something that they know, the correction shouldn't need to be made more than a certain amount of times. That's a whole other science. We'll get into that at another time. But for now, it's about having dancers that just execute their bodies based on how you train them. Okay, so they don't have to think about their corrections or application or what they're doing. They get to think about how they're doing it and performance. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at the science of aerials. Yay! Oh, October. That's so funny. I did put it together this morning. Okay, so we will do a bit about me before we get into it. So I started dancing at 5 and danced at Joanne Chapman. Lots of you have heard of it. Lots of you haven't. It's an excellent school. And by 16, I was a qualified acrobatics teacher from the British Association Teachers of Dance. I did do other exams, though. This is specifically because I'm teaching acro right now, but tap, jazz, ballet, lyrical. I've studied contemporary and acrobatics. So all these things are, I'm a generalist, but definitely heavily focused on acro for a very long time. And then I won Miss Dance for America when I was 16 years old. And for the last it's almost 28 years, I've traveled over 15 countries, educating people in the art of teaching habits. All right. So let's keep going. Okay. So we're going to talk. There's more than one scientific aspect to the aerial, for sure. It's not difficult information. And once you start to open up your mind to look at the body this way, things you can control and things you can't control, what you will find is that your world just completely and totally changes. Everything, the way that you teach, completely changed. And that's because you already have so much information. But what we're not doing is just remembering the limits of the body. There's things that, no matter how much we train that thing, it's not, that aspect of the thing is not going to change. So when we look at cartwheels, aerials, you can literally look at a cartwheel by the way that they land their foot. Now, there are other aspects to this, definitely a lot of other aspects, but today we're just going to be looking at landings, okay? So we're just going to briefly touch upon the landing portion of this, which is, so we've got the ankle joint, which is in the front. So, and that's comprised of the tibia, fibula, talus, all that stuff. Okay, cool. Dorsiflexion, raising the foot upwards, plantar flexion that way. Perfect. Okay. All things we already know. Let's just talk about what happens when we land our aerials when we are a particular distance from our hands. Okay. Now, this is something that is factually correct. I love to teach unbiased teaching. Like, this isn't a debate. This isn't something that you can train in or out of. This is just the reality of two bones that if they're on the wrong angle, they are going to impact each other. Yes, because every body is pretty much the same thing. Don't get me wrong. Yes, there are more flexible. There are at least less flexible, but the structure of the front of the foot, in theory, is the same for all people. Okay. So when you have an excess flex, right? So obviously when it goes to a certain point, which I will show you what those angles are, the excess dorsal flexion causes the talus to press against the front of the tibia. So I will go back and see if I can okay, yeah, here. So the tibia and the talus. So these two bones, this is roughly the same for all people, okay? And no matter what, there is a degree in which these two hit bone on bone. That's it, okay? And I will tell you what that is in a moment. So dorsiflexion beyond 20 degrees may cause bone on bone grinding. It doesn't, I say may because, ultimately, could it be 25? Could it be 15? Could it be 10? Yeah, for sure. But between 10 and 20 degrees, there's a significant increase in risk where your tibia and your talus are hitting together. That's why if somebody's doing an aerial and on that impact, I'm fine, they probably have an impingement and they felt the bone on bone and it sucks and it doesn't feel good and they're constantly chipping away at their bones, right? And there's stress fractures and all these things. And all it is 10 to 20%. So let's briefly have a look at what 10 to 20% looks like. Okay. Oh, well, not yet, actually. I just lied. All right. So we're actually going to look at now the opposite side of the foot, right? So we're looking at, so we looked at the front of the foot. And when we look at the front of the foot, that's the bone on bone. It's not, doesn't really have too much to do with like muscles or ligaments in that front area or tendons. But now let's look at the opposite side, right? So when the foot's here and obviously every angle you go to, there's strain on the back of the foot. Okay. You have the tendons, ligaments, muscles, and the mechanics during landings. So we have at the back, you have the Achilles, posterior tibial tendon, perennial tendon, and so on. This doesn't have to be an anatomy lesson. The point is that you have ligaments and tendons and muscles at the back of the leg that are heavily strained when your leg is on a certain angle, right? Because the connection to that heel bone, all of those things. And that dorsal flexion, which is the flex. So let's just pretend like this is my foot again. This is my leg. And now we're not concentrating on the front. We're concentrating on the back. So 10 degrees is roughly here. 20 degrees is roughly here. And on this, anything past here significantly, right, increases the risk of Achilles tendonitis and strain. Like it's, yeah. And then severe dorsal flexion, which is only here, can overstretch the ligaments to a point of like rupture and tear, but easily. This isn't, this is the scientific degree, like the accepted, generally accepted degree angle for these types of injuries, right? So when we look at the calf, you've got excessive strain on the calf muscles. So anything beyond 20 degrees. Okay. So when you are, let's say you are looking at a kid, right? You can start to just see what angle are they landing their foot on, right? Now. And you can do this in a cartwheel. You can easily do this in a cartwheel. The foot will stop you, right? So we're going to get into telltale signs in a second, but as you can see, this is easy to spot. So let's go back to what we're doing here. Okay. So now let's look at angles. So I put like, this is just a line, like set of angles. I put lines just so that's the leg. Okay. So how easily you can see, like, these are not massive angles, right? 10% to 20%. That is like, that's the safety range-ish. Like that's the safety range that you can kind of get away with without hurting yourself. 30%, 40%, like how many people see that? Like even in the 45%, how many times have I witnessed, especially as a judge, I've witnessed aerials done where they're landing at a 45 or a 50% angle on the foot pretty much all the time. Almost very few aerials I see are within the 10 to 20% range, right? So, okay. So let's look at the early warning signs. So when someone's doing a cartwheel, you don't even need to get to an aerial point, because when you're at the point where you've left the ground and you're landing, what you will find is that your heel is popping up off the floor. So if they're unable to land their heel while they're cartwheeling, right, which means that their leg is the distance. We'll get this distance issue, we will discuss on the 30th, because I have part 1 and 2 happening next Monday and the following Monday. But let's look at if the distance of the leg as you're landing is a certain angle from the hand. Like if your hands are here and your leg's landing here, your foot is going to be on a severe angle. If you're landing here and you land your foot here, look at that. You're not going to be on a severe angle. You're being that 10 to 20%. We will talk more about the distance between hand and the landing foot. But today, just start looking at that, okay? So the next one is over-reliance on the balls of the feet. So if they are starting and landing on the balls of the feet, it means that they are it could be like incredible tightness in the back of the Achilles, could be an injury at the front of the foot where their brain, it's like that mechanism where it's like, okay, we cannot take this angle any further. You have already damaged this landing before. I really need to protect the foot. And so they're always on the ball of their feet. Okay. Knees pushing too far forward. So if their knee is going over their toe, that is a 100% like angle. If we go back to the angles, if their knee, here we go. If their knee is over their foot, it means that they're going to be around the 50 to 60% range, right? Because think about it. If you were to draw outwards, if you were to draw outwards, knee up, right? If you look at distance, probably somewhere around here, knee up. And we know for a fact that that's an injury, okay? So when the knees are going over the toes when they're landing in a cartwheel, that is your sign that the landing portion of their aerial is not ready for them to come up off the ground. They shouldn't even be doing flying cartwheels, okay? Because that impact is just not going to be healthy for their feet. All right, let me go back. Okay. Tension in the ankles or calves. If you do any sort of forward stretch, even like, I always do this. I'm like in my kitchen, I'm in my blanket, but I love working for myself. But if you look at, like, for example, if they've got their foot extended, right, and they're trying to stretch forward and they can't, and you instant see this, it's probably a really good sign that they're not ready to have impact on anything, to be honest. But that action of forward right? Because in an aerial, when we were talking before about distance, you have to get your thigh as close to your chest as possible. But if I'm unable to stay here, like I'm unable to stay here and go here, then that's a problem when landing, right? So that's the tension in the back of the calf, which you will find is a massive issue when they're landing. So that's something that you can witness in their warm up, where you go, okay, yeah, you are not ready to land on that leg. We need to improve the flexibility, say, in the back of the tendon for this to occur. So, and then inconsistent balance or wobbling. So you'll find that when someone's even standing to do a cartwheel and they're like all over the place, that could really signal that the foot's trying to find a comfortable place to stand, because there's probably been some issues with landing before. Again, I want to remind everyone that, injuries from doing aerials, for example, a lot of times they do not present at the moment of impact, right? Because the feet are so they're designed for impact. So there's a lot there where if they're causing a hairline fracture or something along those lines, like you can walk around with a hairline fracture. I mean, I had hairline fracture all at my back, and I danced for 4 years after that. Like, hairline fractures don't just happen, and then you're like, oh, I can see that happened. No, this is something that will progressively get worse and worse, and you won't know why, right? So when you see that wobbling, you see someone really unstable on their foot, even landing, they're just really unable to put that energy through the bottom of their foot. A lot of times that it could be it could be the stabilizing muscle, it could be their gait, it could be their core, it could be their touch points. Could it be 1,000 things? Sure. But it's something where it just could indicate that the foot, like the brain is trying to find a way to get more comfortable on the foot because of some of their impact injuries, because the heel's connected to the ground, and that's where you get a lot of connection with the structures in the back and then the front of the foot, right? Okay, let's keep going. All right. So another important consideration, which I'm not going to talk about today, because I know that is already plenty of information to go by, and you can just start learning to look at your students based on what you can and can't control. And like I said, you cannot change the structure of the front of the foot. You can't stretch that out. There's nothing more you can do with that. So knowing that there is literally an angle that the body, the upper limits of what the body can handle when it comes to the angle of the foot, for both the front and the back, that is an excellent place to start. Okay. Next is hip flexibility and placement. I will say this, something that really bugs me about dance is that people say that there is a proper position for things. There is a general guide for things. There is a place that we can all comfortably come to where visually the audience thinks we're all in the same place. But there is no one placement for anything, because every body is 100% different. And if you get bodies that are very similar, sure, you can start to get some similar positions. I mean, that's not the hardest thing to do. But where the real teaching comes in is when you have two sets of people and that are very, very different, and they're required to execute the same thing. And so when we're talking about hip flexibility, for example, hip shape is another thing that you or I cannot change. Unless they have surgery, unless they scoop it out and they change the ball, and how many of us are going to go, oh, my hip shape sucks, I'm going to go get my surgery now? I would never do that. My hips are what they are. And if you go to my podcast where I did a podcast with William, and I showed him a turnout, and he was like, yeah, that's not good. I was like, no, it's not. So like I was saying on the podcast, so my croisé was like like just there. And then my body had a little twist in it. So I was a little more, it looked like I was more turned out than what I was. And that is called crafty teaching. That is called looking at your student and recognizing that I'm not going to, they didn't want me to twist my feet and my knees were all over the place because that was never achievable. My hip shape was what it was. So instead of hurting my body, my ballet teacher said, okay, this is, everybody needs to be croisé. You know, this is what your croisé looks like. You have excellent, you know, bone shape. We're going to do, and you can just see like the way the natural turnout is in certain positions. So it's not that we can see the bones, but you can see where it stops. And then if you talk to your students, you can see where it feels like the stopping. They'll be able to tell you, oh, yep, nope, that's where that stops for me. And then, you know, range. And this is natural range, right? And then you've got mechanical range, which is using your muscles to hold whatever natural range you've got, which honestly, I know a lot of students that are less flexible, but are able to hold their range. And I know lots of flexible people whose legs just do this and they can't hold it up to save their lives. It all rotates in because there's no muscle. So it's very easy to even out people using muscle. And hip flexibility and placement in cartwheels is something that I have really found not stressful, but I remember the first time I took my former students. I mean, I don't have the studio anymore, but I took my students to an acro workshop with NICA. I think they're called NICA here in Australia. It's supposed to be the National Institute of Circus Arts. Okay. And at NICA, they were telling the kids to hold their legs back, completely back, in line with their hips. Okay. Well, if you're naturally gifted in that range, then that may work for you, because if we go back to what we were talking about with the leg angle, now let's pretend like I'm not very flexible and my hips stop. If I have my legs all the way back, my cartwheel would be here. Now, at what angle, let's look at this. At what angle would my foot land? Look how far out I would have to go just to land my foot. Crazy, right? And this is what we are going to get into on the 30th. I'm going to show you how to work with all hip shapes, okay? Because there is no hip shape that is the same, right? And no matter what, like we just experienced, there is only a certain level of angle that everyone can do in order to, right, not impinge the front or rupture the back. I mean, there's no debate about it. It is what it is, right? And in order to do that, like I said, you need to get your thigh as close to your ribs as possible, like ideally, like right beside. And how do you do that if your legs are here? Look at this gap with my leg and my body. This is not an achievable gap, right? So this is where we start to talk about all of these things, and I'm going to show you exercises on how to get them not only to get into the right position to be able to achieve an aerial, no matter how, like there is a minimal range for sure, but it's not very far, to be honest. I think you'd be very shocked at how little of a split you need to be able to do an aerial really, really well. It's just about placement and working with all those bodies. So that's the 30th. Now, you can come to my part 1, and now that's only $1. October 14th and October 21st, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, which means that Mentor Mondays is going to be starting back up again on October 30th. But if you want to pay $1 and come to part 1, then you can join Mentor Mondays with me. And in that part 1, you're going to learn to identify body types, structure acro classes, understand the necessary components for well-rounded training, train without spotting for most foundational acro. If that interests you, make sure to, I will put the Stripe link, and yeah, hopefully we will see you next week. Thank you all for coming to this week's Mentor Mondays. I really hope that helped. And I hope that the way that you see the body is truly in a way that will serve you, which once again, it's understanding what you can and what you can't control, and then controlling the things that you can control to help all students achieve the best of what they're capable of. Thank you all. And